Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, 2 weeks down, 1 to go for NFL preseason. How have the results been on the exhibitions and across the rest of the board over this past week at Prime Sports and BetCris?
Well, I will keep the results over the past week short because I know we have a pretty solid segment 1 here, and I really like some of the next topics coming up. But I will say the game of the week, which I brought up last week, was the Buccaneers. Money ran with it. Was like 98% of the money when we spoke last week on the Buccaneers. And they managed to just get across the line, I think by 1 or 2, not covering. So good result on that one. NFL in general, I think, was overall pretty good. Baseball looked like a bad week. I think we had a losing week in New Jersey, 1 in Arizona and Kentucky. I can't remember Ohio off the top of my head. But again, calm before the storm, getting ready for the football, the real football, once it gets going. We did have the other football last week as well with the Premier League. Massive upset with Hull, game 1, coming on the first game in the Premier League. Did have a tickle of that myself with the draw no bet and the +1.5. Didn't get it out to the people though, the 8-1 outright win. But yeah, I mean, it's starting to warm up. We've got US Open next week, college football. So yeah, just while I'm freezing my ass here in the desert, in the outback, we're getting ready to heat up in the sports world.
All right, and we'll get to all that and more. But Adam, I've got to say, while we're still early on in the show here, that I almost made it to week 1 before needing a little betting therapy session with you. So if you'll humor me, I've gotten destroyed on teasers through 2 weeks of preseason football after they'd been a virtual printing press in prior preseasons. On one hand, I'm inclined to think they're no less valuable than before, and this could just be negative variance in a small sample size, low totals, still magnifying the value of each point, and numbers like 0, 1, and 2 still much more live than in the regular season. Plus, some sharper books increasingly either don't take preseason teasers or charge enough to wipe out the value, making better prices at softer books as appealing as ever. But on the other hand, more than 60% of games through 2 weeks have been decided by double digits. And we know in the preseason, it can be difficult to pin down any given team's depth chart, scheme they're going to run, motivation to even compete to win the game. That could all suggest too much variance to bother with teasers.
Oh my God, is there a question in there?
Joe, we're almost there. You'll come in shortly. We got to lay this out. There's some nuance.
Sorry. Continue with your therapy. Oh my God.
On a scale of it's a small sample size, keep riding that wave where you still can, to it is fraught with variance, get out before you go bust. What do you make of preseason teasers, especially when it comes to teasing short underdogs up or teasing short favorites through 0?
These numbers are so inefficient. This isn't the time for teasers, in my opinion. However, the fact that you said that it's been, a printing press previous seasons, I guess it's understanding, is it the right way? Is it to go with the money flow? So if the lines move 5 points, you're taking the teaser side back to the original number. But as we've seen the first 2 weeks, and I'm guessing small sample size, is those steaming games haven't fared too well. Mind you, they've sort of fallen within the 6-point category. Haven't looked at totals at all, really just not taking much notice of much while I'm out here touring Australia. But I have noticed the steaming games, a couple of them have definitely gone for the house side, but have also fallen within that 6-point margin. So I would say from, the perspective where you're coming from, small sample size, unfortunate, unlucky a little bit. You've made your money in previous seasons, keep chugging away. But for those that didn't make the money the previous seasons and just jumping in now, very inefficient numbers. Teasers are ultimately won when the numbers are super sharp. And really, even towards the end of the season, I know books start getting beaten up these days because those numbers just getting, sharper and sharper as the season goes on. And they're falling within a field goal or a touchdown a lot of the time. Total is a little bit more variance than the sides, I think, in these spots. But I would say in this example, small sample size, keep chugging along and trying to find a winner.
All right. With that, we'll call it a wrap on this week's edition of Teaser Talk, much to Joe's delight. So we'll pivot back to regularly scheduled programming. But Adam, we will stick with you for just a bit longer here because you're in Australia as PointsBet's CEO warns new outer forms could funnel action offshore, where about 30% of the market already is. So from the ground, how is that landing? And what lessons do you see for U.S. regulators considering similar restrictions?
So for me, kill the ads. I've heard enough times over this past few weeks about people simple people just wanting to watch a game of football or whatever it is, and just constantly barraged by ads. Obviously, everyone knows what I've done. I've done it for here, grew up doing it, the local footy and wherever else. So a lot of these people have known me for, 40 plus years and know exactly what I do. So the conversations have definitely steered in that direction. Kill the ads. I've said it for all the time. Yeah, there's some selfish reasons because it could help us compete a little bit as a little engine that could kind of thing. But I think people are just sick and tired of it. I think even in the US, we've heard it for the last few years, just the amount of billboards, people turn on the radio station and all of this is that TV now with prediction markets and all these things. Kill the ads, is my opinion. And let the people watch this sport and find other ways to do this. On the other things from that article, sort of regulators, I don't want to pick on regulators, but there is so many ways to tackle this stuff. They're really going after the operators when they can be looking at processors and data providers and so many other ways. I know there was a mention of Canada trying to do that on some level. Australia is obviously very bad at doing it. 30% offshore or unregulated market, I think is probably low and probably on the good side of where numbers could be or should be or would be or can be. Yes, compliance costs are getting higher, harder because they're putting so many hurdles in the way of regulated operators. They're definitely losing big players because of the way this is structured, KYC, some of that stuff. Players that can obviously afford it aren't going to the regulated market, and they're still getting catered to in the unregulated markets globally, not just Australia, not just the US, globally. Take the words how you may. Obviously, these are ones being said without saying it, but saying it, it's happening. It's just the way it is. And then when it comes to VIPs, so there's two folds to this. Obviously, we've seen it in the US where VIP managers are probably paid on how much money they can gouge people for, especially on the iCasino side. And there's definitely nefarious acts and everything else that's going. Going back in the days of Bet365, Paddy Power, and all the stories coming out of the UK with people that have lost their houses and stuff like that, with predatory marketing and stuff like that. I get that. Yes, if there's a way to slow it down, shut it down, that does come back on the operators. For me, I don't want to have VIP managers. I don't want to call them VIP managers. Yes, you have big players. Yes, you have players that can afford it. I'm still of the old age of everyone's adults. It's their money. They're allowed to do with it what they want to do with it. But there is definitely people that have issues, addictions, and all those kind of things. And there are VIP managers that are clearly going out there and targeting this, which is definitely a disdain on the industry overall. So, you get into the other aspects of it they mentioned something about 50% of their revenue is in taxes or tax-related items. There is no one in this world right now that really wants to be a regulated book. Me, myself, and I would say that being a gray market, black market, whatnot, is definitely the favorable position if you're out there to try and make money, 100%. But if you're just trying to build an enterprise value, build a product, build a brand, give people a place safe to bet, that's kind of what we're trying to build right now. So, there's a balance to it all, and the regulators and legislators and everyone else involved are really making it hard to want to go the correct path and do this. And then you obviously in the US, you have the struggles of now competing with the prediction markets and all those other fun things as well. So just so happens that there is a regulator convention in Peru in October. Oddly enough, they have asked me to speak. This is going to be fun. So we'll be there for a week with regulators, and it is about these kind of items of how do we compete with unregulated? How do we, channel some of these things? So, I'm getting ready to rock my stuff down in Peru in October, but it's tough. It's tough to be a regulated operator right now.
I don't think it's that unusual that Adam is getting that type of invitation, because I remember one of our very first conference calls with regulators in Ohio, and Adam said, well, what you really got here, and then he went on for about 10 minutes, finally took a breath, and then the regulator said, Adam, you've had some very interesting things to say. Please tell us more. So he clearly isn't afraid to say things that other people might consider a bit risque, but it's also, this is the hard truths that regulators have to hear. The way the world here right now is, I don't think any regulator has the blinders on and think that just because they opened up a regulated market, they're going to draw all the life out of the unregulated markets. But I do think that they're a valuable voice back to lawmakers who I think are a bit absent on all of this.
All right, we'll continue with the theme of lines blurring in this space. BetMGM is redesigning its app around a prediction market odds display, making it the largest U.S. sportsbook to adopt percentages as an odds display format. Adam, we'll start with you here. How do you think about this from your perspective, especially as a way to potentially broaden the appeal of Prime Sports and BetCris?
The first words that come to mind was, for fuck's sake. Seriously? We've had this argument. This has been going on for my entire lifetime. When I started betting, it was fractions. And then we did decimals. And then we had an American bookmaker come over and we did -110. And then I moved to the other side of the world and it's like back to the -110. And then there was some fractions. And then there was a run, I think a year or so ago, about Americans wanting to bring decimals in, whatnot. Now we're adding percentages. I mean, there's some Hong Kong books and Asian books that do percentages. There's some that do, 0 point decimals, 1 point. It's all over the place. I mean, it's just going to turn into a, configurable UI, which you can ultimately choose what you want to choose, how you want to see it. But yeah, this is, I guess, MGM saying we're not going into prediction markets, but we understand some people like to see percentages. I think one thing I saw, or two things I saw out of that article was, one, yes, people love the cash outs. Prediction markets is kind of a cash out model, trade in, trade out. So digging more into your cash outs and the way that's shown on the UI and all those kind of things, definitely something. And then the other one was the CEO saying, they're just other sports betting companies. Fancy that. Someone just saying Kalshi and Polymarket are just new sports betting companies, which, if we call them sports betting companies, they pretty much go up to the top 2 tiers of DraftKings and FanDuel when it comes to volumes and all those kind of things, which knocks MGM down a notch. But yeah, I mean, they're in the market. They're trying to build out their sports betting and whatnot, but they don't give a fuck about sports betting or prediction markets. They're a casino. They want more iCasinos in more than 7 states. So that's what ultimately they're fighting for. That's where they're making their money. They just got the other verticals in there to make sure they're, keeping those casino players at home with something else to do. So, it's much ado about nothing, but everybody's chasing the shiny objects right now.
And Joe, building on that, what's your take on BetMGM's UI update and what it signals to the market?
I don't know if there's anything left. I mean, Adam's chewing all the ribeye off the tomahawk here right now. The one thing I will say is it's interesting how this industry, everybody's a fast follow. So, the wins are in Kalshi and Polymarket sales, between the way they display things. And so what a shock. One of the competitors in the space starts to copy that UI. It only took everybody 20 years to catch up to some of the displays that Betfair had as far as when they were displaying their markets. So congratulations on being a fast follow that took 20 years to copy Betfair. But, if it's more interesting to the players, give the people what they want. Even if you are a state-by-state regulated online casino with a sideline business and sportsbook. So it's probably a smart move. Adam Greenblatt's a smart guy. He's been around this industry. I mean, before BetMGM, he was at Ladbrokes for a long-ass time. So he knows this business, and he knows, give the people what they want. But as far as it being kind of like a sign of innovation or anything like that, let's not give Kalshi and Polymarket too much due, because all they had to do was dust off the history books and look back to a model or a UI model that was created 20 some odd years ago to find their latest innovation.
All right, so we've got a nothing burger from Adam, old wine, and a new bottle from Joe. And with that, the Prime Suspects bingo card is off and running in this week's episode. With that, we'll move on from a refreshed interface to a refreshed look at the relationship between leagues, teams, and gaming. Guys, it's been a minute since we discussed the league's approaches to betting and prediction markets. So with new seasons on tap for the NFL, NBA, and NHL, and with pennant races heating up across Major League Baseball, we'll take a look now at the state of play. The NHL has signed both Kalshi and Polymarket league-wide. Major League Baseball gave Polymarket an exclusive deal worth up to $300 million over 4 years. And Kalshi struck 5 deals this past week, including 4 in states without regulated betting, headlined by the Dodgers, who already have a tribal casino partner that's been battling prediction markets. Meanwhile, NBA talks have stalled and the NFL has refused both outright. Adam, a lot to unpack here, so let's frame it up this way. From the NHL signing both platforms and Major League Baseball splitting the difference, to both the NBA and NFL being at a stalemate with prediction markets, where do you see this settling if we're not looking at permanent fragmentation league by league?
I mean, it's just a shit show in the Wild West all wrapped up into one. The leagues, go sign what you want to sign. These people are throwing around this kind of money. I mean, influence a deal. I've got some time on my hands. I can, send some people Polymarket, Kalshi way. I mean, just take it. Take it. It's not going to be there forever. I mean, signing 4-year deals on potentially something that's going to get shut down in a couple. Take the money. Take the money. That's all I can say from all these leagues, teams, whatever else it is. I got nothing much else to say. Just take the money. Like, why wouldn't you? You're looking at the leagues and the teams spitting in the faces of regulators, tribes, whatever else it is, partners. These are teams that are run by billionaires, and billionaires just generally take the money no matter how it comes across the table. So that's how they become billionaires. So just take the money. It is what it is. Nobody's being told to do elsewise. And let's see how it all plays out.
All right, take the money and run. Cue up the Steve Miller Band. Joe, Adam might have given you some meat on the bone with this topic. Let's dig in on one of these deals specifically. Kalshi's new Dodgers sponsorship puts its branding in the same stadium as Yamava Casino, the team's tribal gaming partner that spent millions fighting prediction markets as unregulated gambling. Both sides have been quiet publicly, but privately, what's your read on the level of tension or perhaps a quiet truce?
I don't think there's a truce. I think there do have to be some safe spaces in the category, and that's the actual games. Look, when we get right down to it, we can argue along the margins about advertising, sponsorships, money, whose model is legal, whose model isn't, or anything like that. Let's leave the game sacrosanct, okay? So getting into a pissing match over the LA Dodgers right now, who are, obviously the premier team in baseball, as much as it pains me to say that, that's not where you should be fighting this battle. And I hope all sides concerned, it seems like they've been quiet in this regard up to this point. I hope they continue to be quiet after this point. But, America nowadays, all it takes is one fucking asshole popping off at the mouth, usually me. And, then it turns into a free fire zone. So I don't know. I would definitely bet against on the game's remaining sacred spaces. But I think it does. I think what Adam, experienced, anecdotally while he's back home is something that has to be true really for the games, sports. And when you see these kind of two industries come into conflict between tribal and the prediction markets, and that's in the game space. And it would really be better if their brands, their ads, whatever, were not part of the game space, were not part of the game experience. I think right now, probably about 2/3 of the heat that comes down on our industry, and when I say our industry, I'm talking about us and the prediction markets together, is because we're not really sympathetic because we're in everybody's face right now. So I think it would be a great idea, back the ads off. It's amazing how the offshore industry, let's just use the offshore guys, like let's use brands that we no longer talk about, but a brand like Bodog got so friggin' immense and never did a TV ad ever in America. Everything was online, targeted, digital media, affiliates, things like that, were able to grow to immense size, okay? They don't need TV ads. The TV ads are intrusive. They don't need to be on the players' jerseys. That's intrusive. Any place where a kid under the age of 21 can see it, they don't need to be there, okay? So, instead of this being a brief interregnum before everybody starts chopping at each other, in the middle of Dodgers Park, let's see if we can maybe use this as a way of saying, like, let's back away from the games and let's not argue in front of the children and let's take this someplace else.
All right. Well, from the early innings of leagues and teams working with gaming partners to the final countdown before cutdown day, Adam, NFL preseason wraps up Thursday through Saturday, and then rosters get trimmed to 53 on Sunday to accommodate this season's opener on a Wednesday when you'll be in attendance on a milestone birthday. With futures markets still taking shape, what are you watching most closely across Prime Sports and BetCris as the preseason concludes and as rosters lock in?
Who stays healthy? I mean, all you're really looking at right now is, cutting down to 53, those ones between 40 and whatever it is right now, and ultimately not really going to matter with a lot of the future markets or anything of that nature right now. Those things, as far as I'm concerned, are locked in. But it's really just seeing the health of the players, what kind of time they get in these last games, seeing what they're, who's ready for the first week, how they sort of come together, how they're gelling together, etc., of whatnot. I think the future markets are pretty well settled. Again, unless there's a major injury or something of that nature. The money's in, the master money's coming in. We're starting to sort of see all those things settling in. And it's really hard with the futures putting up that money for lengths of time. And it's a perfect time actually to put it into prediction markets, because you can actually get out in, days, weeks, or a month if you need to get liquid at any time as well. So just getting ready for it. Games don't really mean that much in that sense. Futures are what they are right now. Just the Rams, way too short. Go against them. Even if they get there, just too short right now.
And this may be putting you on the spot, but thinking about the team the Rams beat in their last Super Bowl, the Bengals had an injury scare today when Jamar Chase went down with a knee injury in practice. I know we're just going off the cuff here. I'm fortunately seeing that Chase appears to be fine and it doesn't look like it's going to be anything serious. But Adam, as we're nearing the end of the preseason and injury scares like that flare up for marquee players who do matter to a point spread, to a win total, before we even get medical updates on a player's ultimate status, how much action do you tend to see in the aftermath of those types of clips going viral?
Not a ton, just because, again, season wins, if he's out 2 or 3 weeks, if they don't know anything of that nature, how much does it really alter it? Yeah, a player comes into his position, it's like they go one less wide receiver in a game and one man down. Someone comes into it, obviously it takes away from the team overall. But, futures, it's unless you've got still some credit outs out there, then you're really not trying to put too much into it. As I say, prediction markets is a good spot for that, because literally it would sail down and then an hour later to be back where it could be. So again, really just educating the players here of where to look when it comes to betting these information things, because you've definitely got these things getting fed into machines that are feeding the prediction markets. So that's your great opportunity now, where you could make 3-4% of your money in a couple of hours if you get the inside info, or get a gauge of what kind of level the injury is and how much, down or up it could cause in the overall market. And that's sort of the spot to look for these things. I know we're going to get into it shortly, but the one thing that I'm upset about by seeing these news notes was Jannik Sinner's knee injury. Usually I'd be on top of this stuff, would have been all over it. But yeah, on the other arse end of the world, didn't see it, didn't get to hit some of the books that I could normally get that wouldn't get that news early and really build a position on the US Open for that. But that's what it's all about. The information is a lot harder than it was 20 years ago. God, I used to have some field days with information 20 years ago and getting on these books that were sleeping for days, not just minutes or hours. And now it's sort of the game of use what you have, access what you can, use that information, try and gauge it to as best as you can of understanding. We go back, dating myself again, 15 years ago when a Kobe would come out of a game and, the market would just overreact. Well, now there's opportunities, cash outs, prediction markets, whatever you want to do, get your money in, load it all up, and then get out an hour later and sort of make something out of it. That's what the game's about right now. So, take advantage of those things when you can.
And Joe, Adam alluded to it. We will get to the US Open in just a moment. But first, college football returns Saturday, headlined by Bill Belichick and North Carolina taking on TCU in Dublin as 8-point favorites. A far cry, I'll say, from USC's status as 38-point favorites in week 0 before everyone's back in action next week. What storylines are you most drawn to heading into the new season?
The absolute disgraceful first game opponents of most of the AP top 10 coach or top 10 poll. The reason why I was looking at money lines is because I was thinking of our bridge jumper in Ohio. God bless his heart. I don't know what he's going to do with himself for the first weekend, because Ohio State versus Ball State, that's off the board. It's such a crap price. Same thing when you talk about number 3, Georgia, and their, tie up with the mighty Tennessee State. There's a lot of states that, top 10 teams are playing. None of the good ones. They're not Penn State, they're not Michigan State. They're, Tennessee State, Texas State, North Texas State, East Carolina, which isn't actually a state. I don't know where that is. So when you look at it, the actual toughest first week matchup of a top 10 team is Ole Miss taking on Louisville, where they are a mere minus 210 money line favorite at home. And to be followed by, this is a big leap up. Miami's at least playing a school that has a name, Stanford, that doesn't include state, where they're a mere minus 450 money line favorite. The reason why I mention that is we get a lot of these guys who have trickled in, and I'm wondering if we're going to see some of the guys who are really into bonding on the prediction markets and how they get in on these incredibly lopsided money lines that you have with college football. You don't see this in the NFL, but you definitely see it early in the season with D1 college football. And I'm just looking at some of these things like Notre Dame, God love them, but minus 1,200 against Wisconsin. It is a neutral site that my wife keeps saying, why aren't we going to the game in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just up the road from where she grew up? But Texas versus Texas State, minus 8,000. Oh my God. But we'll see it. We'll have a couple of those guys, and I'm sure the other shops have these too. Guys that like to think of themselves as big bettors, but they're not. They might bring big money, but they're betting, they're doing the opposite of what everybody's doing. They're betting a lumberyard to win a toothpick. It's supposed to go the other way, guys. Bet a point spread, you sissies, And then regarding Bill Belichick, I think everybody right now is like, what's the over-under on that whole thing coming to a disastrous end? Talk about a guy. They'll talk about his tenure at UNC the way they talk about Michael Jordan's tenure when he played for the Washington Wizards. They won't, Hopefully it's forgotten very quickly once he leaves there.
I was going to fact check you on the toughest matchup a top 10 team is going to have, but it looks like LSU came in at number 11 for their season opening showdown with Clemson. So I guess you're correct there. You called it right with 10 being the cutoff. Although, if we could redo the AP preseason ranks, I'm not sure where LSU would be if you add a couple NFL players to their roster.
Well, isn't that going to be the interesting thing? All these guys saying, like, cut me now so I can go back to college and make some real money, right? It is just unreal what the college game has turned into. It used to be if you took $1 in compensation to play the game, you were done. You lost your eligibility automatically in the NCAAs. Now you got guys, it's like they're combing the Markoff's bin at Marshall's or TJ Maxx to see like, oh, wow, this guy just got cut from, an NFL camp, where they're going to pick up. I'm wondering how that's going to affect like some of these schools, how they're going to improve their standing here once they go to the cutoff bin after this next round of, after this next NFL preseason game. You're going to see another wave of cuts. And how many of those guys are going to be able to head back into, amazingly, another year of eligibility? Plus, I'm sure, be really serious about going to class. There's probably a few sociology classes and fencing and playground management that they didn't get a chance to take while they were there. Now they can really hone in on that degree.
Yeah, to quote Adam from an earlier segment, a shit show and the Wild West all in one may well apply to that topic as well. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to apply to our final topic here, last and possibly least due to some anticlimactic injury news. In tennis, the US Open starts on Sunday. Jannik Sinner's withdrawal due to a knee injury has reshuffled the men's side of things, with Carlos Alcaraz now the clear favorite at about plus 175. Well, on the women's side, we have 4 contenders priced in the range of plus 725 or better. So up for grabs, you guys. Any quick thoughts on the US Open before it gets underway?
No, for me, this has always been the one that I've sucked at the most for literally 3 decades. It really, because the favorites generally, the cream comes to the top. It's hard court. It's the best players generally win. You don't get too many upsets or surprises in the men's or in the women's. So it's one that I've generally had 3 decently good Grand Slams at this point in time, and then just blow it all back and suck in the US Open. So I become a bookmaker at this time and just let other people play. One of my best trades was actually, I think it was Djokovic got beat by the Japanese guy. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. Speaking of bridge jumpers, the location I was at the time, we had a bridge jumper, laid like minus 1,000 pre-event, moved it to minus 950, let him take it again, moved to minus 900, let him take it again. Yes, I'm moving the number better each time he bet. And I think we ended up taking it down to 850 or 800. And he kept coming. Then he called up and said, we're moving the line in the wrong direction. I said, no, we're not. Take it again. And it was one of the best tennis results I think the books definitely had in its lifetime. And I have had trading. So one of the fun facts of the US Open. And when these sporting events sort of roll around, the memory starts kicking in of, oh, yes, I remember this, and start jotting down chapter 45 of the book is US Open, Djokovic, Lay. And so yeah, it's fun times, US Open. I mean, I'm disappointed not to be in the US because there's always some great matches. It goes all day long. It's great bookmaking. Yeah, last Grand Slam of the year. And I think this is where the prediction markets, because I did hear at BetBash that 40% of the sports volume going through prediction markets is tennis. If you have any idea or you want to get on tennis, US Open, use the eyeball test, watch matches when players are getting injuries and fades and all that. Be an absolute fest on Kalshi and Polymarket the next 2 weeks, in my opinion.
We really need some of those young guys, those young earnest guys that we met at BetBash that apparently weren't old enough to drink beer yet, start really digging into the order books at those places. Because I hear stuff like that and I'm like, really? I mean, you know, the order books are open, so it'd be great to see those guys go in there and do a better job. Like everybody needs a good data visualization for this kind of stuff to confirm this. I mean, I will say that I was underwhelmed by the volume that English Premier League did over their first weekend on the prediction markets. I thought, you know, given how much passed through for like Indian Premier League cricket and World Cup, that you'd at least see 8 figures on volume for the games when they got in-game, and no game approached that. I think the closest was the Monday night game with Chelsea, and even that only got up to, I think, like 8.5 million volume in-game. So, but you smart kids out there, get into that order book, start making it easier for old men like me to be able to understand like these things like Adam saying, like 40% is going through tennis. That I'd really like to see.
Well, and from the order book to Adam's book, chapter 45, I'm sure Kei Nishikori going to be looking out for his appearance, courtesy of that historic 2014 U.S. Open win over Novak Djokovic.
He's so quick with Google, isn't he? I mean, he's just like that.
Good, 2014.
Been waiting for that one for a minute.
Matt just knew that one right off the top of his head, right? Jeez. It's like the kid who cheats at barroom trivia with his second phone underneath the table.
First search was Japanese player to beat Djokovic in the U.S. Open. Second search was how do I pronounce Kei Nishikori? But I think we got there.
Good job. I don't think he's watching. So.
We'll go ahead and tie a bow around this week's episode to the audience. Whatever you'll be watching this week, from the conclusion of the NFL's preseason to the beginning of college football and the U.S. Open. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.